The shopping center was busy with late afternoon errands, the kind of weekday noise that blends into a low hum. Denise Bulger stood at a meat counter with her 2-year-old son beside her, his small hand resting on the edge of the cart. James was restless but calm, dressed in a blue tracksuit and holding a bag of sweets. When Denise turned her attention back to the counter for a moment, the space where her son had been was suddenly empty. She scanned the aisle, expecting to see him a few steps away. Then she called his name. The sound of her voice cut through the ordinary clatter as panic began to replace routine. Security was alerted. Doors were checked. Shoppers joined the search. Within minutes, the realization settled in that James Bulger had been taken. The date was February 12, 1993, and the location was the New Strand shopping center in Bootle, near Liverpool. CCTV cameras had captured a grainy sequence that would later be replayed across the country. 2 10-year-old boys walking hand in hand with the toddler, calmly leading him out of the shopping center and along nearby roads. The images showed no struggle. James appeared to be going willingly, too young to understand the danger he was in. The boys were John Venables and Robert Thompson. Both were absent from school that day. Over the next several hours, witnesses saw the 3 together at different points along a route that stretched miles away from the shopping center. Some noticed the toddler crying. Others saw him being pulled along. A few intervened briefly, asking questions, then moved on when reassured that the boys were taking him home. No one imagined what was unfolding. That evening, police discovered James's body on a railway line in Walton. He had suffered extensive injuries. The violence was deliberate and prolonged. The crime scene made it clear that this was not an accident or a single impulsive act. The child had been assaulted, struck, and left on the tracks in an attempt to disguise the murder as a train-related death. The truth was unmistakable. The investigation moved quickly. The CCTV footage provided a timeline and clear images of the suspects. Within days, Venables and Thompson were identified and arrested. During questioning, each blamed the other, offering shifting accounts that still confirmed their shared involvement. The details that emerged were deeply disturbing, not just because of the brutality, but because of the ages of the offenders. The case shocked Britain in a way few crimes ever had. A toddler had been abducted in public, and the perpetrators were children themselves. The questions that followed were immediate and relentless. How could 2 10-year-olds commit such an act? Where were the warning signs? What responsibility lay with families, schools, and the systems meant to protect children from harm and from becoming sources of it? The trial began in November 1993 at Preston Crown Court. Venables and Thompson sat in the dock in elevated chairs so they could see over it, a visual reminder of their size and age. They were charged with murder. Medical and psychological testimony addressed their backgrounds, intelligence, and understanding of right and wrong. The court had to determine not just what they had done, but whether they knew what they were doing. After weeks of evidence, the jury found both boys guilty. The judge sentenced them to detention at Her Majesty's pleasure, an indeterminate sentence reflecting the uncertainty of how long rehabilitation might take. A tariff was later set, establishing the minimum time they would serve before parole could be considered. Public reaction was fierce. Many believed no punishment could match the crime. Others argued that the offender's youth demanded a different approach. James Bulger's family endured a grief that never softened. Denise and Ralph Bulger became public figures overnight, their private loss debated in headlines and political arguments. They spoke repeatedly about James as a child, not a symbol, and about the permanent absence left behind by a life ended almost before it began. In the days immediately after the discovery, police reconstructed the route taken from the shopping center using witness statements and camera footage. Officers walked the same streets, measuring distances and times, documenting how the boys crossed roads, entered building sites, and moved through neighborhoods without drawing sustained attention. The reconstruction showed how easily a vulnerable child could be moved through public spaces when bystanders assumed nothing was wrong. Psychologists later testified about the boys' developmental understanding. At 10 years old, the law required proof that they knew their actions were seriously wrong. Expert evidence addressed impulse control, peer influence, and the ability to foresee consequences. The jury's verdict confirmed that, despite their age, both understood enough to be held criminally responsible. That finding would shape later reforms and debates in youth justice. Media coverage was intense and often invasive. Photographs of James were printed repeatedly, while speculation about the boys' families filled columns. Courts eventually imposed reporting restrictions to prevent identification after release, balancing public safety with the risk of vigilantism. In 2001, after serving 8 years, Venables and Thompson were released under new identities, granted lifelong anonymity to protect them from retaliation and to support rehabilitation. The decision was controversial and remains so. Thompson has not reoffended. Venables, however, was later returned to custody multiple times for offenses related to child exploitation imagery, reinforcing public anger and fear about the original decision. For the Bulger family, time brought no closure, only endurance. Anniversaries arrived with renewed attention and renewed pain. Statements from officials and commentators could not change the fact that James's life ended before it properly began. The family's insistence on remembering him as a child, not a case, remains central to how the story is told. Decades later, the murder still influences how Britain thinks about accountability and mercy. It sits at the intersection of child protection and criminal responsibility, forcing an ongoing reckoning with prevention, punishment, and the limits of understanding. The ordinary afternoon that became a national trauma continues to inform how communities watch over children and how the justice system responds when those protections fail. Thank you for listening to Homicide Files. Subscribe for more true crime stories.